Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of the Undp Diamond TV Public Discussion Forum. We're broadcasting to you live from Zambia's capital, Lusaka, and we are here at the Mlungushi International Conference Center. Now, the panel discussion today will focus on Parliament Oversight and Executive Accountability, which will feature Stephen Kawimbe, National Assembly Deputy Clerk, Procedure, Honorable Anthony Mumba, Kantashi Member of Parliament, Honorable Ernest Mwansa, State Council, Honorable Sibeso Sefulo, Mwandi Member of Parliament, and from the Zambia Institute of Policy Analysis and Research, we are going to be privileged to be joined in by Muchimba, Siamachoka, who is Research Fellow and Head of Unit, Human Development, and also we're going to be privileged to be joined in by Dr. Simutanyi, Governance Expert. Welcome to you all, and thank you so much for making time to be part of this debate. To our esteemed viewers and audience, we thank you for making time to join us today again. We're discussing Parliament Oversight and Executive Accountability. We have 60 minutes of this engagement, of which 20 minutes will be accorded to the audience for the question and answer session. This public forum has been made possible by the UNDP in partnership with Diamond TV. I'm your host for today. My name is Andrew Mwansa. So like I said earlier on, I'm going to run through the panelists again for people to be familiar with them and for you to appreciate where they're coming from. Again, joining us for this discussion forum, we have Stephen Kawimbe, National Assembly Deputy Clerk, Procedure. We are also privileged to be joined in by Honorable Anthony Mumba, Kantashi Member of Parliament. We're privileged to be joined in by Honorable Ernest Mwansa, State Council. Also in the building, we have Honorable Sibeso Sefulo, who is Mwandi Member of Parliament. We're also joined in by Madam Muchimba, Siamachoka, Research Fellow and Head of Unit, Human Development at the Zambia Institute of Policy Analysis and Research. Last but not the least, we are also privileged to be joined in by Dr. Simutanyi, who is a governance expert. And we're joined in by yourselves as well. A big round of applause for yourselves. Allow me to recognize the people that have come to be a part of this debate. From the NGOCC, we have the Executive Director, Madam Anamela. A big round of applause for her. In the audience, we're also privileged to be joined in by Chapter 1 Foundation Executive Director, Josiah Kolala. We're also privileged to be joined in by Operation Young Vote Executive Director, Mr. Ges Nyarenda, as well as Executive Director and my good friend, Ian Band. A big round of applause for him. Well, let's begin. Like I said earlier on, we're going to begin off with Mr. Stephen Kawimbe, who is the National Assembly Deputy Clerk, Procedure. To you, sir, we would like to find out, what are the main challenges to achieving effective parliamentary oversight over the executive arm of government?
Thank you very much, moderator, and good afternoon, everyone. When you talk about the challenges, I think maybe first let me talk about where Parliament draws its mandates to provide oversight over the executive. This is derived from the Constitution. The Constitution vests the legislative mandate and the oversight function on the National Assembly of Zambia, whereby the executive is collectively accountable to the National Assembly of Zambia. And in doing that, in carrying out the mandate of oversight, the National Assembly has got various mechanisms. One is the committee system, where committees mirror the makeup of the executive. And in so doing, they ensure that every year they carry out activities which oversee the operations of the executive. Secondly, we have a slot when Parliament is sitting where members of Parliament are able to ask members of the executive, the ministers, questions on the operations of their ministries. It can be anything. Say, can you provide us with information on how much we're making from copper, how much we're making from timber, and such questions. We also have private members' motions. Members can introduce motions on the floor of the House, urging the government to do certain things. For instance, change legislation or introduce some regulations. All that is done through private members' motions. Where we face a hurdle is the whipping system of the Westminster style of parliaments, in that ordinarily members of parliament are supposed to toe the line of their parties. So your free will is kind of curtailed, but it's not written anywhere that they should follow that. It's just practice. So that's one of the hurdles. Others is I think, public outreach. In as much as we want to consult members of the public on decisions of the National Assembly, it's quite costly to go around the whole country to consult everyone. So you find that normally we just carry out consultations at Parliament, which might be difficult for some people to access. However, we do have online platforms where people can interact with the National Assembly. We also do some outreach. Sometimes when funds are available, we go to the provinces. But even then, we can't go to each and every town in this country. It's costly, it's tedious, there are other things to do at Parliament. So those are, I think, some of the problems that we find in carrying out effective oversight.
I love the fact that you mentioned one thing that is very critical, and I love the fact that the whip for the opposition, members of Parliament, is in the House as well, Honourable Anthony Mumba, Kantashi, Member of Parliament. Mr. Kawimbe mentioned something that has been a practice but not a written law around behavior of members of Parliament when they belong to a named political party. And obviously you as Chief Whip, when you come up with guidelines under which your members of Parliament ought to operate on, there's no written law, but they have to follow those guidelines. Maybe break it down to us, Honourable Anthony Mumba, for members of Parliament that go outside what you've said as a whip, but also what is the importance of members of Parliament that are coming from a named political party to follow the guidelines that you set for them as a whip of that party?
Well, firstly, it's important to recognize the most important thing. Why is a member of Parliament there in the first place? So, as Mr. Kawimbe put it, we draw our mandate from what has been clearly stipulated in the Constitution. So, a member of Parliament has a role to ensure that legislation is carried out, appropriation of the national budget. You also have to represent the people that elected you, and one of the ways you represent is by bringing matters to the attention of government that the people are being affected or would want government to address them. And then, of course, apart from that, you need to make sure that you are representing the people. So these are the key reasons why you're there. Now, of course, in an ideal situation politically where you have a united opposition, the role of a chief whip is easy because you're as one front. But in our case, it's slightly different. It's a very difficult situation that I find myself in. But looking at an ideal situation, you're expecting members of Parliament, first of all, to uphold the decorum of the House. That is by ensuring that they are observing the rules that, again, we set for ourselves in what we call the standing orders, which really kind of give you a blueprint of how you're supposed to conduct yourself, even if you want to participate in legislation, whether it is through a private member's motion, or how you want to represent the people, or how do you want to participate in the appropriation of the budget. And then, of course, the oversight in ensuring that you are asking the executive the questions as to why certain things are happening or why government is not reacting in a particular way. But all that, the bottom line is that you need to do it in a respectful manner, in a manner that upholds the decorum of the House, and at the same time satisfying the people that elected you, because they will see that you're addressing the concerns that they have. Now, with the investments that Parliament has made through Parliament Radio, Parliament TV, and even through the social platforms, people are able to follow the happenings on Facebook and so on, and therefore they are able to determine whether that member of Parliament is indeed representing them in accordance to the aspirations that particular individual used to make them vote for him or her. So basically that's what is expected in terms of Member of Parliament's performance and participation.
Do opposition members of Parliament have minds of their own to make independent decisions? I think we've seen this even when watching through Parliament TV, where if a leader of the opposition walks out of Parliament, usually the team from the opposition is going to follow that leader of the opposition. Do they have minds of their own, or perhaps this is practice that has been laid down on how you should be operating as opposition members of Parliament?
Well, first of all, to walk out of Parliament is part of some of the liberties that you enjoy as an opposition when you feel that you're protesting over a particular matter. But like you have said, ideally, as an opposition, you're supposed to be united. And in your unity of purpose, you must be able to agree that some of the issues that you have displeasure that the government is probably carrying out are not petty. I think if you look at the roles that I've identified as stipulated in the Constitution as to the reason why you are there, because you can imagine if, as members of Parliament, politicians as we are, there are no rules that guide you. Can you imagine the chaos that would be in the House of Representation? So, yes, walking out is allowed, and you do it respectfully, but sometimes it's also abused because, you try and be unnecessarily political. But if you're a united opposition, and really you are looking at substance, and people out there who are watching, the people that have made it possible for you, who have privileged you to sit in that august house, would ideally agree with you, even if they're not there in presence. I think that is where one has to strike a balance, especially for us who have been given this opportunity to provide some leadership in assisting the presiding officers to ensure that as business is being conducted in the House, it's being conducted in a manner that upholds the decorum of the House. So it's sometimes, these are politics. Sometimes you want to grab political headlines in newspapers, and you're going to see a lot of this happening until we go back into the House as we get closer to the elections. But the question is, what is the substance and what's the value in terms of to those the people that have made it possible for you to actually be in the House of Representatives?
Fantastic. Let me come to you, Dr. Simutanyi. How do you assess the current capacity of Parliament to hold the executive accountable?
Thank you very much. I don't think I'm being heard. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's there are many areas on which we, the public, are disappointed with the effectiveness of Parliament to discharge its functions. I think Article 63 is very clear as to what the functions of National Assembly are. To appropriate the budget, which is done in a more routine way, that even where members are very opposed to certain areas in the budget, it's always passed. Then accountability is another, of course. that Honorable Mwamba was talking about on holding the oversight and holding the executive to account. I think this is one function which has not been very effective, because there are many areas of concern that Parliament has not really effectively exercised guidance or oversight. Mr. Kawimbe did outline what is supposed to be done. We know that there are committees and that ministers, especially civil servants like permanent secretaries, are brought to come and account for certain things. But there are many areas, especially when we talk about the principles of ensuring that the equitable distribution of resources in this country, where we think, personally, I think that the National Assembly has not been very effective. What does it mean? One of the functions of members of Parliament, the National Assembly as a whole, is to ensure that the resources that they appropriate are equitably distributed in this country, both in terms of the amounts that go towards development, infrastructure, and so forth, but also ensuring that no group or no part of the country left behind. But we see that there are many districts that are still highly impoverished. There are many new districts that lack basic infrastructure. And one wonders what Parliament is doing, but that's one of its functions, to ensure that if the executive is going to create new districts, it's also going to ensure that it provides necessary resources for those districts to develop, so that they're almost on the same level as others. I've also noted that we have a CDF which is celebrated, and I think it's a good thing that we have the new government, or the current government has provided more resources than before. But there's no equity in the distribution of these resources. The constituency in Lusaka, like Awata, for example, gets the same amount of money as a constituency in Shangombo or Kalabo. And definitely that's not equitable, because the constituency in Lusaka has more resources already, has more facilities, and to actually distribute resources in a manner that shows that they are on the same level, I think it's inequitable. And that's where the oversight issue comes in, that our representatives in Parliament are supposed to say, no, you can't give so much resources or money to constituencies that are already highly developed, and you give the same amount of money to constituencies which are really behind. So that is another part. Then lastly, I think it's the issue of, I don't know whether it is to do with how the voting takes place in Parliament. But what we find is that the executive tends to be too overwhelming, and that the voice of parliamentarians and the effectiveness of Parliament as an independent institution don't seem to be there. On issues where there is polarity, we tend to find that people vote on party lines, even where the executive is in the wrong, or the executive is taking a position that is not acceptable. I think we would like to see a situation where Parliament can at least show that it's an independent institution and it's not in the pocket of the man in State House. Thank you.
And it's good that also we're privileged to be joined in by a member of the ruling party, who is member of Parliament for Mwandi constituency, Honorable Sibeso. What is your reaction to what Dr. Simutanyi, has raised, the concerns, for example, around inequitable distribution of CDF? They're supposed to have more resources for impoverished, constituencies, but also on the voting pattern, in the House. What do you have to say about those issues being raised?
Thank you so very much. When it comes to CDF, I wouldn't want 100% to agree with him. When you look at constituencies like Mwandi, where I come from, that is very, very much impoverished compared to constituencies that are doing better. You find that CDF is given literally on a lateral level, which makes it very, very difficult for MPs that are operating in areas where development is far, far much less compared to constituencies, for example, like Kawata, that has so many, the road network is better, the network is better, the hospitals and the schools. But for example, for me who comes from a rural constituency where a child still needs to walk 22 kilometers for them to be able to access CDF, is still very, very difficult. But then what is remaining is that the UPND government has made it sure that we improve the CDF from the 1.6 million that it was at to 36.6 million, which is, we've made a jump, to make sure that constituencies are developed. What is the next thing that we should be able to take is to make sure that we can devise a formula where we look at constituencies that are less developed so they can have more CDF compared to constituencies that are, developed better. And also, when you look at the mining constituencies, they have a lot of social corporate responsibilities apart from the CDF that exists in those constituencies. What social corporate responsibility do I expect in Mwandi? Completely zero, because it's a rural constituency and there's no industrialization there. So the government has done so very much well in moving a CDF from the 1.6, the 36.6 million that is currently at. Now we need to look at a formula that makes sure that we are able to we move constituencies to an equitable level, where the one that is standing at a higher, development level, the one that is lesser is able to give a stool that is higher than the one that is more developed than the other. And then when it comes to the whipping system that you earlier mentioned about.
But before we go to the whipping system, are those discussions that you're having as members of parliament in the distribution of CDF?
I think what is also important to note is that, like I've indicated, I think Mr. Kawimbe made mention that we parliamentarians have the privilege to move private members' motions and also move private bills that are able to move these things into effect. It doesn't matter whether you come from the opposition or you come from the ruling party. That is the privilege that as a member of parliament that we have. I think we've made submissions in that regard, and we are looking forward to having more members of parliament from the opposition and the ruling party, toiling that lines to make sure that we can move our CDF in that regard. But we do not have a formula yet. I'll give you an example. Kabwata constituency is far much smaller in size than Mwandi constituency and is more developed. But when it comes to population, Kabwata constituency is more densely populated than Mwandi is. So how do we strike a balance to making sure that we look at the population as well as looking at social amenities that exist in the constituency compared to Mwandi, that is the rural constituency that is so vast, but people are sparsely, people are scattered across the constituency. So I think that the government is hearing, but we need to find a formula that will make sure that resources are equitably distributed to constituencies based on what it is that the level of development that the constituency is at. And I think that when you move that, the government is very listening. So with that, I'll move to the question the discussion that we're having about the oversight that Parliament is having in regards to ruling and the opposition. I think for me, we need to move in a position that Parliament is very independent from the executive. I'll give you an example. Right now, our ministers who are part of the executive sit in Parliament. Okay? When a minister is moving a certain bill, they sit right in Parliament. What does that do? So we have the executive and the legislature both sitting in the House. I'll give you an example of Rwanda, what Rwanda has done, and other countries have moved forward too. They've made sure that there's a complete, separation of power and duties between what the executive and what Parliament, the legislature does. So the executive does not sit in Parliament unless they have a bill to represent. So apart from that, the executive becomes very independent from for the legislature becomes very independent from what the executive does. But also the whipping system in Parliament is different. Sometimes we find that the ruling or the opposition tore the political lines more than looking at the Zambian people. There are times when bills come on the floor of the House that are very, very important, that have been, for example, brought from the ruling party. But because it's a ruling party that has brought a certain bill, the opposition will try by all means to collapse it, and vice versa. So as Parliament, for me, I think that we need to move from looking at the opposition and the ruling, and generally look at the Zambian people that we represent. What is it that the Zambian people are saying?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Honorable. Are you telling us today that you sense some form of interference with how the executive operates, especially owing to the fact that the executive and the legislature sit in the same house when it comes to ministers and members of parliament? So are you raising a concern that there's been so much less of independence in the operation of parliament because of the fact that there's the presence of the executive in the National Assembly?
What I'm saying is, as one of my duties that I've been given as a legislator or as a member of parliament is oversight. And this oversight entails that when I see something that, for example, I think that it cause conflict of interest, I should be able to raise it. Right now, I'm not saying that there is that conflict, but there is potential conflict because the executive and the legislature sit in the same house. In other jurisdictions, 100%, when you are appointed as a minister of a certain jurisdiction, immediately resign as a member of parliament. That is to provide proper, distinction between the executive and the legislature and the judiciary. For example, we do not have anyone that is sitting as a judge sitting into parliament.
Let me come to you, State Counsel Ernest Mwansa. What ways do you think Parliament can work on to encounter potential executive overreach?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me begin by agreeing with her that one of the challenges obviously faced by members of Parliament is this idea of the executive being in the legislature. The executive, meaning ministers, previously it was deputy ministers included, all of them being part of the legislature. Two problems arise from there. First of all, it creates the feeling in members of Parliament who belong to the ruling party that to get promoted, you need to toe the line. And that creates a problem because people begin to think the only way I'll get promoted is to toe the line and avoid being controversial. That way, the powers that be, that's the executive, will be able to see me and promote me to the position of a minister. Secondly, the Constitution, our Constitution, unfortunately, gives certain powers to the executive that affect Parliament. For example, in the choice of Mr. Speaker or Madam Speaker of Parliament, the law currently is that even the President has a right to choose a name of a candidate he or she wants to be Speaker. Now, we human beings, just like we do not love the idea of someone stepping on us and messing us up, we also are very soft to those who appoint us. It's a natural thing. So you put the office of Mr. Speaker or Madam Speaker in quandary if that person has been chosen by the executive as the first choice. That person cannot operate freely without thinking of the appointing authority. That is a big problem, But thirdly, the president himself or herself, according to our Constitution, is also a member of Parliament. So the executive has fit in Parliament at presidential level, fit in Parliament at the appointing of the Speaker, and unfortunately fit in Parliament at ministerial level. So you've got three positions, which is, if you like, and from my perspective, which institutionalize the executive being in the legislature. And for as long as you do not separate the powers or share the powers of government between three arms of Parliament properly and equitably, you have a challenge. One arm of government is going to become stronger. So if answering your question, therefore, those are the three major things that we have to deal with if we are going to make our Parliament effective, responsive, and able to challenge what the executive does. We do not need the president in parliament. We do not need cabinet in parliament. Neither do we need someone appointed by the president to be Speaker of the House.
Interesting. Let me come to you, Madam Siamachoka. Quite interesting views that you've shared there, State Council Ernest Mwansa. But let me come to you, Madam Siamachoka. Given the current political landscape, how would you assess the effectiveness of Parliament, oversight in holding the executive accountable, and what are the most critical gaps that need to be addressed, according to you?
Thank you so much, moderator. I think several of my colleagues have spoken to the political scenario, but speaking from a research institution, I would like to reference the committee system that we earlier spoke about. Quite a lot of work goes into those processes. Several witnesses, including ourselves, appear before the relevant committees and several stakeholders, so to say. But once that committee report is produced, perhaps the bigger question is how can we look at an environment that will ensure compliance with some of those recommendations? It could be an issue on health, for instance. You have several players in the sector making very critical recommendations. So from our standpoint, that would be one gap that we might want to pursue in terms of ensuring that even when these committee reports are adopted, are presented to the House, how do we ensure compliance with the recommendations that would come out? And in a similar sense, I would refer to the Auditor General's report, for instance, to move slightly away from this matter. Year in, year out, you tend to note recurring issues that are highlighted. Then that begs the question to say, how do we address some of these issues? The Member of Parliament from Kantashi did refer to platforms such as Parliament TV. We follow these debates, we follow discussions, for instance, with the Public Accounts Committee that are scrutinizing and highlighting issues around mismanagement. But a tendency, I would say, in this country is that case could be very high profile. We could debate around it, there could be calls for action, and over a period of time, you tend to note that this may die down. I think that also speaks to empowering our committees to be able to investigate, empowering several offices within the parliament structures to ensure that they are also able to follow through on some of these actions and some of these recommendations that do come up from different stakeholders.
You had a pressing issue to raise, Kantashi, Member of Parliament, Honorable Mumba.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I've carefully listened to Dr. Siani, and there are a few things that, and also the State Council.
Simutanyi.
Simutanyi. Oh yeah, I'm also Mumba, not Mwamba.
Oh,
sorry. So, thank you for that correction. When matters are discussed in Parliament, they become what are known as government assurances. So this now becomes a responsibility of the executive. So I wanted that to be made very clear, because it's not like we just talk. When those reports are adopted, or whatever a minister says on the floor of the House, if it is not done, that's why there is a handset. You can go and pull out that handset and present it back and said, on such and such a day, this is what was said. But I wanted to express a little bit of concerns. One of the things that I've noticed in Zambia is that to cure some of the challenges or bottlenecks that we have as a country, we seem to go totally astray. If you look at what's happening in the Constitution, State Council once I was talking about, when you're a member of the party in government, you are scared, you toe the line, and so on. The fact of the matter is that you are belonging to a club, and in that club, you agree with the rules you find in that club. And that's why when you go in the House, you cannot be against your club. If you're against your club, then you have to be alone. Then you have to be an independent. And then, I also do not subscribe to the fact that a minister, for him or her to perform better, they should not be voted members of Parliament. The oldest democracy that we draw from, the United Kingdom or England, the setup is very clear. So where is the problem? In addition, as Parliament, we have exchange programs to go and see how our colleagues are doing. When State Council was talking, it reminded me of one thing. When you become a member of Parliament, obviously you aspire to be a minister. And obviously, you later on aspire to be a vice president. Obviously, you later on aspire to be a president. That's the hierarchy. And there's no need to make any apologies about it. That's the hierarchy. So, if you are in the House, what is the point of somebody coming out of somewhere out there to become a minister when you people are educated? Now the rules are that you have to have minimum grade 12. So at least you have some semblance of some minimum qualification. So what I think needs to happen is, how effective are you as a member of Parliament? How effective are you in that organization? Because when you look back from where we're coming from, we have had some good decisions that have brought our country or taken our country further, and we have also had some bad decisions. We have had some good laws which have helped the country. We have also had some bad laws which are personalized probably to a president trying to fix somebody. So how do we cure those? Now, when you talk today, for example, we're coming from an era where we abolished deputy ministers. But you know what has happened in the ministries? You go to a big ministry like Ministry of Health, instead of having one permanent secretary, a permanent secretary is the chief executive of the ministry, very huge conditions of service. You now have 3 permanent secretaries, on average in almost all the ministries. What are those other 2 doing? It's the extra work, which somewhere it's not being covered. But we failed as a country to say, wait a minute, these deputy ministers, why have we failed to define their roles? Why have we failed to make them act when the substantive minister is not there? But what did we do? We went and removed them, and now we have 3 chief executives per ministry.
Per ministry. Just hold your thought there, Honorable.
So in short, for me, I think what we need to focus on is not to create new problems, but to go back to the drawing board and say, how do we improve where we are? Yes, there is no one who doesn't toe the party line.
I'll get back to you on that point later. But Dr. Simutanyi and State Councillor Ernest Mwansa after Dr. Simutanyi.
Yes, I think really that's where the crux of the matter is, on the role of a member of parliament. Because a member of parliament is supposed to be a representative in parliament, supposed to represent a constituency, represent people, constituents, and is supposed to take the concerns of that constituency to the national body and ensure that they are addressed. So then it brings up the issue of accountability. To whom is the member of parliament accountable? To the constituents who voted for him or her, or to the party that actually sponsored him or her to parliament. So that's where the contradiction is. And I think most members of parliament tend to think that they are more accountable to the political party that sponsored them to parliament than to the constituency that actually voted for them. And that's where that should be resolved. Because elsewhere, where this has been addressed, it has been found that the members of parliament need to be accountable to the people that elected them. And this is why it is not necessary to have cabinet ministers or ministers in the legislature, because then the accountability issue is compromised.
And perhaps that's why his point is that if you wanted to be accountable only to the people, why then can't you not contest as an independent member of parliament so that you are not accountable to the club that sponsored you? I think that is what his point is.
Yeah, but I think what happens is that because of a polarized political landscape we have, even the so-called, sorry to use the word, even the independent members of parliament are actually affiliated, or somehow they are aligned to one of the main political groupings. It's difficult to just be absolutely independent. So the way they vote will show you their alignment. So this alignment it doesn't go away. But also there are incentives for aligning with the party in power. But there are also penalties for not aligning with party in power. And we have seen how these have played out. I think Honorable Mumba was trying to allude to that. That actually, if you don't toe a particular line, there's the possibility that you can be punished for it in one way or another. So this is why it's a tradition. So over a period of time, our parliament is over 60 years old. So you can see that actually a certain culture has evolved over time, but we can actually address it through a constitutional engineering.
State Counsel.
Thank you very much. I will just respond briefly to Honorable Mumba's concerns. Firstly, if we are going to make this country work and work well, we must be clear what system we want. Is it a system where the president has the power that he holds now? Or is it a system where we would rather have a prime minister? One of the challenges of the Zambian system of governance is basically the mixture of two systems into one. Namely, we have taken the parliamentary system of government from the British, and we have taken the presidential system of government from the Americans. These two are not the same systems. You can't marry them and expect good results. That is the first thing we must bear in mind. We must either accept to run a prime ministerial system of government, or accept to run an executive system of government, where the president is head of state and of government. We must be clear, because the structures that follow come or emanate from how we have agreed the system should look like. When you hear Honorable Mumba talking about a member of parliament must aspire to become a minister, to me, it shows that we have not understood the system that we should have. It means we are okay with a president with the powers that he has and a parliament that is compromised, because we have the executive in that parliament. There is a way out of that concern by Honorable Mumba, namely that if we have a pure parliamentary, a pure parliament as in the states practiced, then the promotion of members of parliament is not to become ministers, but to become chairpersons of the committees of parliament, who hold almost the same power and ministerial authority that they must have in order to challenge what the executive is doing. That is what we must ask ourselves, is that the way we want to go? Once we have done that, then we don't need to have members of parliament who are aspiring to be ministers. They will have their own role to play. The president will have his own team of appointed, in America they call them secretaries, but here obviously they will be called ministers. The president will appoint his team for cabinet. Parliament will remain with its team and the committees. That is how you can strengthen the committees of the House. That is how you can ensure that the executive is actually overseen in the responsibilities that it has. Of course, we all want to be promoted, but let's be promoted within structures that will help the country develop. That, to me, is the issue we must bear in mind when we are looking at this. Zambia has married two systems that work differently, and the result is what we see today. Allow me to say this. I was a member of parliament for 15 years until I decided to rest. Okay? We challenged our own government, the MMD. I'm sure Dr. Simutanyi will remember. Even the CDF that is now being exercised in a better form. I was one of those, there were three of us, myself, Honorable Newton Ngoni, and Honorable Mukupa, who began to agitate for constituents development fund, because we realized that most development was taking place in urban areas, while the rural areas were being left out. So we felt that there was need to have some money that is directly going to constituencies for constituents development. At the point when we were agitating for that, we were almost removed from the MMD because it was believed that we were opposition, until we had meetings after meetings with the president and the vice president at the time. And we explained to them why it was important to begin to put money in constituencies. So it is possible to stand your ground, even when you are in a government, if the government is not doing something right. But that is not the way we have evolved. In fact, our evolution has been that you toe the party line so that you can be promoted. And that is why, for me, it is better to divide these two institutions of government into two. Because the temptation for promotion is human. I want to be promoted. But can I be promoted in an area that does not compromise the ability of the legislature in terms of it overseeing the activities of the executive? I think that's the way we should be looking at it. And I think, Honorable, that is my humble view on the matter. It's not that people should not seek promotion, but rather let's have structures that ensure that you can be promoted in line with what you have chosen to be. If you choose to be a member of parliament, represent the people that chose you. If you choose to align with the president, then represent the president and you go out with him when the people decide against him. But that is what you will find in the United States, for example, members of parliament. You will find in the US members of parliament who have been members of parliament for over 50 years, over 70 years, but they still belong to political parties. Why? Because their concern and responsibility is focused on the people who have sent them to the House.
Madam Siamachoka, do you agree with the current system that we're operating on, or perhaps we need to change the system?
Well, I think colleagues have debated on the issue quite extensively. From our perspective, being a policy research and analysis institution, some of the systemic or institutional challenges that I would want to highlight, and these were earlier mentioned by my colleague, how do we look at resolving National Assembly of Zambia's financial and operational dependence? Colleagues did mention it would be nice in some instances to have members go to another country to benchmark, for instance, to appreciate a particular perspective. It would be nice for us to have enhanced outreach to ensure that the very people that we are mentioning as being people that voted members into office are also represented, whereby they are able to interact with their members of parliament. How do we also enhance the role of the constituency offices? Because that is also a platform through which National Assembly could also ensure that they are supporting, of course, the members of parliament in their respective areas, but they are also churning out information in that regard. The larger discussion here for me is how do we have policies and laws that actually serve the Zambian people? So it's quite important that we look into some of these issues quite critically.
We're going to turn to the Q&A session, and I will ask you, our beautiful audience, to raise your hands in case you have a question. My colleague will pass around to get your names. So if you have a question, kindly raise your hand. But to you who is joining us from home, you are watching the public discussion forum brought to you by UNDP in partnership with Diamond TV. We are broadcasting in Zambia's capital, Lusaka, at the Mulungushi International Conference Center, and we are looking at Parliament Oversight and Executive Accountability. Our guest panel include Stephen Kawimbe, National Assembly Deputy Clerk, Procedure, Honorable Anthony Mumba, Kantashi Member of Parliament, Honorable Ernest Mwansa, State Council, Honorable Sibeso Sefulo, Mwandi Member of Parliament, and from the Zambia Institute of Policy Analysis and Research, we have Madam Muchimba, Siamachoka, who is Research Fellow and Head of Unit, and Human Development. Also, we have Dr. Neo Simutanyi, who is a governance expert. I believe the questions are ready now. Those with questions? All right, so just raise your hand if you've just raise your hand so that we could be able to see. If you've got a question, kindly raise your hand. We're also streaming this program live on our Diamond TV Facebook page. That's at Diamond TV Online. And so if you haven't liked the page yet, go to Facebook and like the page. But also the stream is live, so you can drop your comments and contributions on the comment section.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, panelists. My name is Undp, and I'm Executive Director of NGOCC. I'd like to address the issue of the conflict, I'll call it conflict of interest of members of parliament because of them having to toe the party line. About 4 years ago or so, or 5 years ago, when the PF was in office, I witnessed something that I thought was quite sad. I remember at the time the Vice President, speaking about the need to pay off pensioners. There were arrears for pensioners, and she raised something around that which needed some approval at some stage. I can't really remember the details. But the opposition did not agree with that simply because it was coming from the ruling party. Now, this is where you find a real challenge in this alignment to party positions. Those members of parliament in there probably had people in their constituencies who were part of those people that needed their retirement benefits or whatever emoluments were accrued to them to be paid to them. But because they had to toe a certain line, I can't remember whether it was voted against, but then they were against it. And that to me is a typical example of why when parliamentarians go to parliament, they should always remember that the first reason they're there for is to represent their constituents. And if they're in there and are so worried and concerned about who they need to align with, that compromises them. And that brings me to the issue of the appointment of ministers as well. For as long as ministers are appointed from within parliament, we will always have a challenge of a lack of, I don't want to, well, maybe we could say objectivity. And I don't know why it would be so difficult for us as a country at this stage, given the dual system that Honorable has talked about there. How easy would it be for us to change our system and actually appoint members of parliament from outside parliament if we are to get objectivity and ensure that parliamentarians stick to what they're supposed to do? My second point was on the use of the constituency offices. I think various studies have shown that people know this exists, but they don't go there, they don't utilize them. And we're talking about an informed population out there. Not everybody is on social media, not everybody listens to parliamentary TV. So we need to use those constituency offices more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Manamela, for that question. We have a question for Mr. Gesnyarenda there as well.
Thank you, moderator, and good afternoon to the panelists and distinguished colleagues. My name is Ges Nyirenda from Operation Young Vote. I will speak to 3 issues quickly, and some of them have already been raised by the panelists. The first one is we tend to find ourselves in the situation we are in as a country because the legislature is politically polarized. I know, yes, that we are in a multi-party democratic dispensation as a country, but I think we ought to realize as members of parliament that our primary and fundamental role as we go to parliament is to ensure that we make robust legislation, robust laws that respond to the aspirations of the people and not to toe the party line. We have seen that for a very long time, parties have tended not to, to go with what the people generally want. So for me, I think, seriously speaking, I would like to speak to the heart of the Honorable Mumba to rethink your decision or your opinion that you need to toe party lines, because then you risk not being re-elected by your people in your constituency, because you are not elected by your party, you are just adopted and the people elect you. Secondly, I think we have seen a tendency, Professor Simutanyi and State Council there spoke to this issue. We have seen a continuous tendency of wanting to weaponize the legislature. And this is quite worrying. And one of the case in point, in terms of an example, is where the executive has a very strong hand in appointing the speaker, whether elections are done or not. But I think what happens there in terms of getting the speaker of the National Assembly to being is actually some kind of weaponizing the legislature. The last thing I will discuss is the issue to do with the appointment of cabinet from outside parliament. And this is very fundamental if we really want to see that the doctrine of separation of powers in our country, they come to fruition. We need to ensure that we have a parliament that is very independent from the executive. We need to have the president appoint his cabinet from outside parliament. If you want to be promoted by the president, wait until you are promoted. Don't stand as a member of parliament, so that the members of parliament will concentrate in ensuring that they give checks and balances to the executive, and will have a country that will perform to the expectations of the people of the republic. I thank you.
Thank you so much. I guess that was a contribution. We can get to the back. There's a hand at the back there before we can come to the other side of the audience.
Thank you. My name is Given Kapolio. I'm from the Center for Trade Policy and Development. I think mine is also just a word of caution, especially to our members of parliament, and perhaps a reminder that the power of the people is greater than the power of the people in power. And ultimately, we have seen repeatedly that members who have represented the interest of the people tend to always go on long before their party abandons them. And to just remind that we are there because people elected us to be there. Even if you are the party's favorite, if the people in a particular constituency give up on you, then it is done. So ultimately, we are there to serve the people, and our greatest role there should be that we represent the people that we are there to represent. Zambia is a representative democracy. We can't all be in parliament, otherwise we would be there to represent our own interests as people. So we send representatives. It's representative democracy in that you represent the people that elected you and not the party that adopted you. And the decisions, the magnitude of decisions that are made in parliament are that they affect each and every Zambian. And therefore, to forward the interest of a small number of people, which is a party or a club, as you might want to call it, is, if to be blunt, very selfish and very disappointing. I'd like to just encourage and urge our members of parliament, those present and those not here, those that might be listening when they do listen, that when you do sit in the chamber, when you do sit in that house, your role is to represent the interest of the citizens, the Zambians that elected you. Because every time elections come, it is not your party that will elect you, whether they adopt you or don't adopt you. If your constituency feel that you have adequately represented them, we have seen members of parliament who have been re-elected by the people despite being dropped by their political party. And therefore, I encourage members of parliament to just put the will of the people first, because the power of the people is greater than the power of the people in power. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that contribution, Given Kapolio. We have Ian Banda here.
Thanks so much. Ian Banda, disability inclusion expert. I think my question goes to Honorable Anthony Mumba, Member of Parliament. You agree with me that the involvement of people with disabilities in the process of holding government accountable is important when it comes to promoting inclusion. And we are aware that October 2023, the Parliamentary Caucus on Disability Inclusion and Rights was launched, but ever since we feel as persons with disabilities, our needs are not met. How are you ensuring that the Caucus on Disability Inclusion is strengthened in Parliament, and also influencing government, mostly to the head of state, in ensuring that there is at least an appointment of a member of Parliament who has got a disability, because we feel nothing about us without us, and the need of having a member of Parliament who has got a disability in Parliament, we ensure that there is inclusion and representation of persons with disabilities.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ian Banda. Let's come here. Yes, you can start from there.
Good afternoon. I've got two questions. My name is Joshua Tole. One will focus on accountability, and the other one will focus on CDF. So how do we ensure that accountability is highly effective from those in the opposition or ruling party with regards to CDF disbursements? And this is how effective we've seen sometimes from the Public Accounts Committee in Parliament, because some cases naturally just get to die down after they catch the public eye. Some cases maybe regarding health, just to mention a few. Then the other question is, in as much as CDF is there in constituencies and the number of pupils in rural areas go to school, yet have limited teachers, does the CDF cover the stationery of the pupils? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I believe maybe, Doctor, one more question and then we can conclude.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Gideon from Quays Initiative Organization. And my question goes to the honorary member from Mwandi. Has the New Dawn government put in place a well-displayed structure of how CDF must be distributed in respective of constituencies? Because we have seen CDF looking like a game changer to other constituencies like Kawata, but other constituencies like Chawama, which are still facing issues of waste management, it looked like a myth. And to that, I would like you to state whether CDF should be equally or equitably distributed. Because at the moment, it's like giving the same school fees to your son who is in grade 12 and your daughter who is doing tertiary education, maybe at Mwansa. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for those questions. If you want to clap, you can clap. All right, let's begin the reaction time with the Clerk of the National Assembly. Procedure.
Thank you very much. Those are very interesting interventions. I just want to set the record straight on the election of the Speaker of the National Assembly. The Speaker of the National Assembly is elected through a secret ballot by members of Parliament. The Speaker of the National Assembly is not a political appointee, in that the person is not expected to belong to a political party. If you remember the election of Speaker Mwamba, he was I think he was Minister of Agriculture at that point. When he was nominated to become Speaker, he had to give up his seat as Member of Parliament and become an ordinary citizen. Now, since the election of the Speaker is by secret ballot, ordinarily it means the party with the most seats in Parliament will carry the day. So, but that does not mean the Speaker of National Assembly is a political appointee. No. It's just the way the numbers are structured.
But then how are the names forwarded to those that are interested in becoming speakers?
Well, those are things which work in the background. We've had, when Speaker Matibini was elected, I think he stood against well, there were two candidates, I remember. Those activities take place in the background. What we have in Parliament in our standing orders is the procedure to nominate them, how we receive the names, when the names are received, and whether they are backed by the necessary backers, like maybe 2 members submit the names. So it's a process which happens in the background, but when it comes to Parliament, it's an open process. We say these are the names we've received who are duly nominated to the Speaker. The election will take place on the first day of the sitting of a new Parliament. So that's the process.
I'll move like this. Your reaction to some of the questions that were raised, would you like to respond to any of the questions?
Thank you so much. I didn't really have any question directed to me, but perhaps just to re-emphasize the comment around constituency offices, we are talking about issues of inclusion. You will appreciate that digital infrastructure in some areas of this country is quite poor. So how do we leverage on those offices where resources don't allow us to reach those places? But it doesn't mean that National Assembly, in terms of the central office here in Lusaka, should not pursue those efforts. And also perhaps a slightly different comment around oversight. We do have certain mechanisms in place that are working well. We can also continue to learn from different countries, and I will reference the Public Debt Management Act. And the reason why I'm doing so, a country like Ghana, for example, beyond approving a borrowing plan as a blanket plan, the minister has to go back and present each and every loan with its terms and conditions to members for them to debate and fully appreciate. So where we've made progress, I think we didn't have that act before August 2022. It's quite important that we pursue means and ways to ensure that we continuously build capacity, even of the members. Remember, some are not re-elected. In some areas, you have a new member after 5 years. How do we ensure? And this is really a call to several stakeholders. It's not just National Assembly, civil society. What role can you play? Think tanks like ZIPAR, for instance, what role can we play to continue just supporting the operations of the Assembly?
Doc?
Yes, thank you very much. I think in response to the question posed by Mr. Namela on whether there are any laws that allow for ministers to come from outside Parliament. I think we've had a lot of constitutional review reform reports in the past that have repeatedly proposed that ministers should come from outside Parliament. The executive has always refused that. But it's already on the table, and the electoral reform, electoral reforms proposals, that this issue has come up many, many times. I think even now, that the electoral reform technical committee that is now sitting, I think it is one of the things that has, one of the issues that is being canvassed. I think on the issue of equity and the issue of CDF distribution, one of the functions or responsibilities of members of Parliament is to ensure equitable distribution of resources. But this has to also take account of the needs of the constituents. So while the principle of equitable distribution is being applied to the letter by the current government, by ensuring that the distribution of CDF is equal, my submission is that it should take account of the needs of the constituents, and it should be weighted so that a constituency in Mulobezi or elsewhere which has different needs should have slightly more than a constituency in Osaka. In that way, our representatives in Parliament will be ensuring that at least all the people are properly served. Otherwise, I think personally, the members of Parliament, to ensure that they provide the oversight that they are supposed to provide according to the Constitution, and to show they are accountable to the electorate that elected them, and to be independent. It is important that the separation of powers between legislature and executive is put in effect, and that is only possible if the hand of the executive does not appear in the nomination. I know the clarification which has been made is correct. The nomination of the speaker is often made by the executive, the president. And I think that's why there's a perception that the speaker does not appear to be independent. Thank you.
State Counsel.
Well, I think the two colleagues have adequately handled the issues that I would have loved to speak to. Maybe just to add that I too have been at the constitutional commissions which have been around, except for the Mungomba one. And I can assure you that the people in Zambia really want to make sure that their parliament represents them. That is a guaranteed in all of them. And as Professor Simutanyi said, in terms of the need to have the executive outside parliament, starting from the Mungomba to the Mwanakatwe to the CRC, all of them without exception have advocated for the choice of cabinet from outside parliament. And I can assure you that, in fact, the Mungomba constitution draft provided for that, and also the CRC in the constitution itself, and also the Leti Silungwe's technical committee. It was the members of parliament, both opposition and government, who rejected the idea. And I suppose for the reasons that we have heard this afternoon, okay? Because we have been used to the idea that, you know, when you become a member of parliament, the next thing you must aspire for is becoming a minister. It doesn't have to be that way. We can create a system where chairpersons of committees of parliament are as strong as the ministers of government. In fact, if we are talking checks and balances, it must be that way, that the chairperson of the committee must have the muscle to challenge what the executive is doing if we are going to achieve what we want, namely that the executive should be held accountable for what it does. Parliament has to be strengthened, and strengthened in a manner that makes sure that they are not compromised by executive underhands. We must do that, or we won't move from where we are.
Honorable Sibeso.
Thank you so very much. I want to agree with the Honorable. And let me make mention, when I was elected Member of Parliament for Mwandi constituency, I must say my constituents were looking forward to me being appointed minister, you know. So every time that the president sat and made appointments, they were very, very disappointed that I wasn't. But for me, I was telling them, I'm a chairperson of the Committee on National Economy, Trade and Labor Matters. And that for me as a legislature puts me in a very, very powerful position of making sure that I can provide oversight over the government. And my constituents didn't understand that. For them, the promotion meant that if I'm doing so well, I'm brilliant, the only promotion that can come to me is being a minister. And for me, I don't think that our promotional system should be that way. Let me quickly touch, even in the educational system, it doesn't mean that for you to promote a teacher, that teacher has to be an administrator. No, a teacher can be a teacher of English doing so well in class because that's where their talent lies. And we should find structures that promote that teacher within them being a teacher. You know, it's the same as doctors. We have doctors, surgeons that do so well in the operation room. We've taken them to be administrators and they're sitting in an office where they don't even perform so well. They are better off being in the operational room, you know, operating doing operations and doing so well. And we can find a way of promoting that doctor who's a surgeon within the operating room to making sure that they can deliver effectively to the talent that they're being given, opposed to us promoting them to positions where they have to sit and do papers in an office. So for me, when you look at other countries, they've made sure that the committee system is so strong because they provide the oversight over the executive. And when I'm still the chairperson of National Economy, Trade and Labor Matters, and I'm so proud to provide oversight over the executive in that regard. And then secondly, there was a question that was asked to me directly in regards to the distribution of CDF. There are guidelines that exist within this, CDF, and we are very grateful. I'm glad to hear that the former member of parliament, the honorable, is one of the teams that, the honorable members that came up with the CDF. I remember it was in 1995, and my father was also one of the MPs that were sitting in parliament at the time that came up with the CDF, to make sure that we can take constituency development funds to our constituencies. We are very grateful to you, and that has lived, and you should be honored because, the proposal that you made has taken development to the rural constituencies in our countries. So there are guidelines that exist within the CDF where this percentage goes to education, this percentage goes to skills development. But apart from that, the CDF, the way it's structured, is that the decision is made by the people themselves. And this I also have to make sure that I mention, that our people understand that the power that they have, they elect the MPs, but right now they also have the power to elect the WDCs, who are the ward development committees that oversee the development of a certain ward. So the power within the CDF does not lie within the member of parliament. No, it's a bottom-up approach. So the powers lay with the people themselves to make sure that they can take the development that they want to see in their areas. We cannot, as a CDF committee, approve anything that has not come out of the WDCs or within the ward. So the power is vested in the people. And it's important for us to make sure that the people, the Zambian people themselves, understand the power that they have. In regards to CDF, in regards to electing their members of parliament, that when a member of parliament is representing well in parliament, keep that member of parliament. It should not be towards certain lines that are not vested within the member of parliament. So let's make sure that we educate our people to understand the power that is vested with them. So in regards to CDF, in regards to choosing the members of parliament, the power is with the people. Let the people use that power to make sure that we deliver the development that they want to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Anthony Mumba, a lot of questions directed at you.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you to all the people that have asked questions, and thank you for the responses that have been here. I have actually a very totally different thought in a number of issues that have been talked about here in relation to members of parliament, how they represent themselves. I think as we're seated here, I do respect the fact that State Council was able to be elected 3 times. And I can assure you, it was highly dependent on the political parties that he was in and was tolling the lines of that political party. Because if he wasn't, he was not even going to be adopted. And he knows that. And further to that, I know that he was one of the people who was being canvassed to be elected for speakership of the National Assembly. That I also know. But in all that, you also need to know, for my colleague coming from CPD and guest Mwansa, amongst everybody here, I'm the first person to be elected as an independent member of parliament in 2016 at a time when Patriotic Front, as powerful as it was only 5 years in office. Okay? So, I have an understanding of being an independent member of parliament. I also have an understanding of what it means to be a member of parliament. And I can assure you, as I've been in the PF, I am actually shocked, because where I was putting country first, which is people first, I was told, no, my friend, if we are saying we want Edgar Lungu back, that should be your line of thinking. So you can imagine how conflicted you become in the political party. And I was even thinking to myself, why did I even join a political party? So I also wanted you to understand matters that are not even talked about. There are people out there who have been saying, why should a member of parliament serve more than 2 terms? A member of parliament's term is actually 5 years. And I can assure you, out of 156 of the people that sit in parliament every 5 years, only 30% of them come back. So 103 to 105 are new members of parliament. Every 5 years, even as we go to elections next year, it will be new 105 members. There will be only about 30 to 40 old members of parliament. And this is why I have deep respect for Honorable Mwansa, who served 3 terms. It is not easy because of the perceptions that are out there. Now, strengthening of committee chairpersons. Again, those positions of chairpersons, the Honorable served for 3 terms, knows that the ruling party will influence who becomes the chairperson. And you, who's coming from the opposition, there are committees like public accounts, which are specifically for opposition. Okay, in fact, it's the only one which is for opposition. The ruling party will take all the critical ones. That's why she's chairperson of trade. She's new. She has not served in parliament. This is her 3rd year. There are people like me who have served 8 years. Okay? So I'm just giving an example of the politics that go to play. So people first, yes, I have had that opportunity. In 2016, I had 12,000 votes. In 2021, I had 14,000 votes. Okay, going up. Usually when you're going into a second term, your votes come down. But I wanted you to understand, I'll now take you to these positions of minister and what have you. The reason why, for me, I would have the position that I have is, first of all, a minister's position is a very temporal position. There are very few ministers who can tell you they served the whole 5 years, and if they were lucky, they went on for another 5 years. Very rare. Out of maybe 35 ministers, maybe 2 or 3. You can calculate that probability. But why is it so important for a member of parliament? First of all, in a community, you are not the only best person who is knowledgeable, who interacts with the people. You basically get lucky that the community identifies you. And then when you come to parliament, you want to take a leading role. And one of the leading roles is obviously a committee, and can also be in the executive, directly in the executive. But these problems that we have identified, and our seniors who are here, the DOC and the State Council, have a history which we cannot just erase now. I've learned that we have 2 systems, the British system and the American system. And actually I've been thinking about it right now. But I was also thinking, but again, the ruling party controls all the key committees in the National Assembly. So it still speaks to the same thing, because the names that they float, the president approves them. Oh, okay, Honorable Sefulo, Mwandi, oh yes, give her. And State Council knows. He knows. He can't run away from that. And this is what usually happens. Even on public accounts which they don't have a say, they will debate, okay, who is user-friendly, who we can work with. Oh no, let's pick that independent. So for us to erase the very valid and good points that the DOC and the State Council have identified, we will need to go really back and try and see. And we've got to do it from a very structural point of view, not driven by emotions or trying to get to the end without looking at the process of how we can properly do this. Yes, I do agree with the fact that if you don't represent the people well, they will not vote for you. And that's common even in PF. They would adopt somebody because they're comrade. He agrees with them. All right? But that person loses. That's why probably we had so many independents. Okay? We have never had the level of independence that we're having right now. That has also crept into UPND. And that's the nature of the structure of our politics. So we really have to go backwards, and we shouldn't shy away from accepting that these norms that we are now starting to question, because when you look at the minister, the State Council knows, having served in Parliament long enough, the minister's pay point just moves from Parliament to the ministry. We purely get the same gratuity, we purely get almost the same allowances, probably in certain committees even more, because certain committees in Parliament travel more, certain committees in Parliament have more work, and the minister's salary might even be beaten. But when it comes to the gratuity, we all queue at accounts for just that same gratuity. So don't think if you are called a minister, then you are earning more to the extent that, you know, everybody will be your envy. We all drive loaned vehicles. All those big vehicles you see, all those are loans. So nobody should tell you that, no, me, I got a car. Of course, they will have just a little. Just a little. It won't be much. Okay? If you are a person who's privileged to even having a business on the side, you'll probably be even living better off than the minister. But it just, that promotion aspect, in the community, you're honorable. At national level, it's a human thing for me. But if you can also contribute better by, as a policy carrier, the Minister of Health, you know, you leave a legacy of better health service that people can look back and say, look, when we had that individual, that lady, that gentleman, you know, we had doctors more committed, nurses, you know, with the doctor-patient ratio, you know, drastically improved. You know, health services, you know, were in order. We had clean hospitals. I think that there's nobody who wouldn't want to have that privilege. So I would want to remove the issue that maybe if you're a cabinet minister, then you're earning so much more. No. The pay point just moves from National Assembly to the ministry that you're serving, and it's basically the same, almost the same. You might get some allowances from that ministry, but the people who remain at National Assembly, and probably just to buttress the point that the State Council was mentioning, would even earn more, because the chairpersons of committees even earn slightly more. But for me, I've not been looking at it from the earnings. It's just the responsibility, and also maybe being part of a contribution at, you know, further than just at community level, but at national level. But I do agree that there is need to review these things so that we realign them to the growth of our population, to the growth of our economy, and to also the opportunities that we are trying to create as our country continues to move into a particular direction. So for me, that is my take. I'm open to ideas of how we can better what we have now, so that the end game is that we all, first of all, do not remain in these positions. It's just for 5 years, which is 60 months, and you go back to the community. If they don't renew your contract, they vote you out, or the party that you are representing decides not to adopt you, which contributes to this 60%, 66% of the people who don't come back. So it's a very delicate balance, but I wanted to be as honest as possible, because I have been as an independent, and then now in the PF, one of the most unpopular people because of the positions that I've taken. Others even say I've been backstabbing people, something that I find very strange, because if I tell you to say, be a statesman in your face, I don't think I've backstabbed you. But others have said, have you seen, after adopting him, after the party sponsored him, after the signature of the person who is now telling to retire. And these are the things that we're facing every day. But I have only one consolation. We never remain permanent in these positions. And to you, Ian Banda, I remember, what am I doing in my constituency? I've had conversations with you. We are supporting the people with disabilities. At national level, I've been pushing that the president also appoints people who are with disabilities to be in strategic positions. Permanent secretary, we have seen a good appointment at Bank of Zambia the director in charge of a very strategic directorate. So we want to see more of that. I always make sure, as you know, in my constituency, even in terms of the grants, as I went to my constituency last week, I saw on the list that we did not have participation of colleagues coming from the disabled. So we are trying our level best, and I know in most constituencies it is happening. But for me, I can assure you, I'm open to ideas. You can bring them over. You can tell me you're well traveled. The last time we met was in South Africa, and last time you also visited me at Parliament. So I'm open to more ideas coming from you. But of course, we have to be inclusive. I just thought that I would make sure. And to guess Nyirenda, I can assure you that I am winning in 2026. I'm ready to come back to Parliament because of the work that we have been able to do in the constituency. But it has been very difficult to strike a balance between toiling the party line and making sure that you are not called a stabber, or you are not called to say no, you are no longer upholding the people that made it possible for you to hold that adoption certificate. So it's a very delicate balance, but we have to work for the people. It's country first, then the party. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. We've been discussing Parliament Oversight and Executive Accountability. My panel has been Stephen Kawimbe, National Assembly Deputy Clerk, Procedure, Honorable Anthony Mumba, Kantashi Member of Parliament, Honorable Ernest Mwansa, State Council, Honorable Sibeso Sefulo, Mwandi Member of Parliament, Muchimba, Siamachoka, Research Fellow and Head of Unit Human Development at the Zambia Institute of Policy Analysis and Research, ZIPAR, and Dr. Neo Simutanyi, Governance Expert. I think they've done pretty much a good job, didn't they? I think we can give them another round of applause. On behalf of the entire production crew and our partners, UNDP, thank you so much for being a part of today's edition of the UNDP Public Discussion Forum. My name is Andrew Mwansa.